Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation on impacts of trawling and bycatch on oceans. Throughout history, mankind has used fish as a primary food source. As a matter of fact, fish bones were found in archaeological dig sites that point towards Homo habilis and Homo erectus possibly being our very first fishermen 500,000 years ago. As years went by, in 3500 BC, Egyptians began to use the spear, net, and rod and line technique, which can still be used today. During the 8th century BC through the 6th century AD, the Romans actually used fish as a form of currency in their many markets. It was in the Middle Ages in Europe, during the 5th century AD to the 15th century AD, that the lords had control over the many rivers and lakes. And as a matter of fact, fishing was very strictly regulated and prohibited in these areas. It was, of course, in the 11th century AD that Europe began constructing ponds and introduced the new idea of fish farming. As years went by, in 17th century AD, Great Britain were the first to build the first trawlers. And of course, in 19th century, with the introduction of steam power, trawling actually became the #1 method for commercial fishermen to use, which actually helped their businesses take off. Today, we can see many different methods used to catch fish. One of the oldest styles that is still in use, that the Egyptians introduced thousands of years ago, is using the rod and line technique. There have been advancements though. Let's take a look at some of those right now. Gill nets is a type of net that's placed in the water that usually catches fish as they swim through it. Of course, it's usually caught on their gills, and these nets can be set in a line, a circle, in a drifting or stationary pattern. And it actually catches about 25% of salmon caught in Canada. There are also seine nets, which are bottom-weighted nets that are placed in the water surrounding a school of fish. The purse seine draws bottom of the net in, capturing fish, while the Danish seine funnels fish into net by pulling them behind a boat. 50% of the commercial salmon caught in Canada is caught using these nets. Dredges are shovel-like iron frames with fine nets that rake the seabed, usually collecting such things as scallops and clams. The trawls, however, are huge towered nets consisting of a frame with a net bag attached to a boat. Most of them are dragged along ocean bottoms, but there's also some that are dragged in the mid-water ocean levels for different species of fish. Let's take a moment to see what makes trawling work. Trawls are actually cone-shaped nets that are towed behind one or two boats on the ocean floor or in mid-water. These cone-shaped nets usually end in a bag, which makes escape nearly impossible for all marine life. Floats and weights are added to the mouth in order to open it and to drag it across the ocean floor. Fishermen use different mesh sizes in order to determine what type of species they mean to catch for that day. Now, trawling has caught nearly 14 million tons of fish between the year 1950 and 2015, and it actually offered new fish species to be bought on the market. However, this system of fishing has been employed all around the world and has been in practice for far too long. Sadly, this method of fishing is destroying our ocean floors. As fisheries drag heavy nets, chains, and huge metal doors on the sea floor, it stirs up a lot of sediment and destroys a lot of habitats. Scientists believe that the amount of sediment being stirred up is equivalent to the amount of mass being deposited by rivers every year, which is close to 22 gigatons. So this trawl acts as a sort of rototiller on the sea floor. And as it rototills through these habitats, a lot of bottom-dwelling plants are being ripped apart, their roots being uprooted, and a lot of different marine species homes, which they burrow into the sand, are being destroyed. Rototilling the sea floor and kicking up so much sediment changes the nutrition levels in the water. It can also black out the sun, which highly affects the natural process of photosynthesis for these bottom-dwelling plants. Of course, as it rototills the seafloor, it changes it into more of a rocky terrain than soft mud that so many plant species and marine species rely on as a form of food and for a house. Trawling does more than just rototill natural habitats on the seafloor. As a matter of fact, trawling leads to a lot of bycatch as well. Here's a sad fact. Fisheries almost always throw away more fish than they keep. As a matter of fact, shrimp fisheries throw away 6 pounds of bycatch for every 1 pound of shrimp that they catch. That's a lot of bycatch. So the bottom trawls grab everything in their path, including shark species, which 15% of them are threatened by extinction thanks to trawls catching them in their nets. There's also a lot of fish species that are being threatened by extinction because they're baby fish that are in these habitats that could grow old and repopulate these areas are being caught and, well, they're being killed and they're not able to repopulate their local habitats. There's also a lot of sea turtles and marine mammals that are being killed as well. There are over 200,000 loggerhead sea turtles killed every year, 50,000 leatherback sea turtles, and over 100,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises being killed every year in bycatch. It is no surprise that the trawling method is the most destructive fishing method because it is destroying our oceans. These trawls severely damage our seafloor ecosystems, not to mention many endangered species that are on the threat of extinction continue to be caught in bycatch. And sadly, this is happening at an alarming rate because 90% of everything that trawling nets catch is usually bycatch, including coral reefs, which take hundreds of years to redevelop. With these wide, heavy nets destroying these seafloor habitats that feed and house many marine species, if we don't put an end to trawling now, the damage may become irreversible. Not to mention new medicines that have been found while scientists have been researching these seafloor habitats could be lost forever. Around the world, scientists, ecologists, and marine biologists are fighting hard to get their governments into action to stop trawling. And in Great Britain, in 2009, the Marine and Coastal Access Act was passed, which helped lay the foundations for marine conservation zones to help rebuild seabeds and also to help bring back cod, haddock, and other fish in these areas. It took several years to work out the details for these safe zones, and in the long run, only 27 out of the proposed 127 safe zones were created. Never fear though, all is not lost. Conservationists and marine biologists are trying different approaches to force Britain's government into stop trawling in a lot of different ways. In 1992, under the EU Habitats Directive, there are more safe zones today than ever before. As a matter of fact, these safe zones can be seen near Cornwall, Isles of Scilly, Devon, Dorset, Hampshire, Isle of Wight, Thanet in Kent, and also in Northumberland. Here on the west coast of the United States of America, different factors have actually grouped together to help save our nation's seabeds from trawling. There was a lawsuit that was put into motion by Oceana, Ocean Conservancy, and National Resources Defense Council that actually created 200,000 square miles of no trawl zones on the coast of Washington, California, and Oregon. Today there's new fishing gear being implemented and employed to help cut back on bycatch and destroying our ocean floors. And the fight is actually a good one, and people are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, you and myself can always help by donating to the good fight, by donating to organizations such as Oceana, WWF, and Marine Life Institute.